Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of Timcast IRL. I am so excited to be here with a number of several guests. Some of you have been asking about guest host Tim Pool and when he's going to be back. He likes to hang out here with us. Unfortunately, Tim is a sick man. Tim is sick. And he's getting the help that he needs right now. And so we're all just going to wish him well and hope that he gets better soon. In all seriousness, he should probably be back in a few days. But technically, when I said he's a sick man, there was nothing factually incorrect about that. That is literally true, right? I mean, I have a lawyer here who can confirm that nothing I said was incorrect.
At this time, we have no further elucidations to add to your statement.
Thank you very much.
We do wish to reserve our right to make any additional amendments as might be required.
Yeah, well, it's interesting how my first time ever hosting the show, Tim was like, we need to send a lawyer in here just to fact check him and make sure he stays on point all night. We have a number of stories tonight. The OceanGate story, the tragic loss of the OceanGate CEO and his son on the Titan. The Minnesota AG warns Target about their obligations to the LGBTQ community. A Pentagon accounting error to the tune of $6.2 billion. An IRS whistleblower talking about Hunter Biden and his investigation, as well as an AI saying that conservative women are happier and more attractive. Interestingly enough, we have all of the juicy stories just in time for Tim to be sick and for me to take over. But let me tell you something, because I still care so much about my friend who's allowed for me to take the wheel tonight, I'm going to ask all of you to go over to castbrew.com. Check this out, all right? For the cost of one bag of coffee, you can support my sick friend, Tim. And we will send you a bag of coffee in Thanksgiving. Now, of course, I won't make any promises. Again, we have a lawyer here. You will go there. You will purchase the coffee. I can't tell you if it's going to have anything to do with Tim's recovery, but I think he'd feel a little bit better, at least with respect to his morale, if you guys purchased some Cast Brew coffee. And also, it's going to make me look good. He's going to say, look, you know, Shimcast hosted and we moved more product than usual. What I'm telling you is I need this. I need this. So please, Cast Brew coffee or just castbrew.com. Get yourself some coffee. And while you're at it, I want you to head over to timcast.com and become a member. You dirty dogs. All right. You're sitting here. You're watching this content. Tim has built this massive platform so he could give you the news. We're very grateful to him. And if you are able to, we would massively appreciate it if you became a member, supported what he's doing, supported his mission, and help him grow out what he's trying to do here, which I think is a good thing, and I hope you all agree. You'll also get access to the After Hours show, which is going to be pretty spicy. So now that I have sufficiently introduced the show, we have with us today the man who needs no introduction. What's your name again?
I am Tim Pool.
Well, hold on a second. We can't do this. You're the legal expert here. Are you able to impersonate him?
Why don't you sue me?
Oh boy!
Bring it on.
I'm not the one who's going to do that. I'm saying that like Tim might have a case against you at this point.
No, actually, it would be the best thing I could do for Tim to actually speak in his voice in a way guaranteed to avoid any legal entanglements whatsoever.
Yeah, it's much appreciated. That's why people hire you guys.
Issues related to contagion and where he has been recently before this illness.
Yeah, of course.
I'm Ron Coleman.
Yes.
Ron Coleman, the lawyer on Twitter. I mean, there are other lawyers on Twitter, but I'm the fun one.
He's not the only one.
I'm the fun one, and I am so happy to be here. And everybody gave me little notes, little messages for Tim. And I feel kind of like a schmuck, frankly.
Why is that?
Because Tim's not here.
Yeah. Oh, they give you messages to pass along. Not like get well soon stuff.
No one gives a shit. Please.
Oh well, maybe they're schmucks. I want my friend to get better. Castbrew.com. Get some coffee.
We all do. We all do. We all do.
You know what? That's enough out of you. That's enough out of you.
Listen, I could go.
We have had we would like to continue this conversation, but Hannah Claire, she's really going to be the one digging into you tonight. She is a very solid reporter at Timcast.com who has a few things to say about tonight's stories.
She has been gunning for bear since the second I walked in. It has been a very, frankly, aggressive and pugnacious.
Yep, that's me, Hannah Claire, aggressive Brimlow. That's what they call me. As you can tell, I think this will be a pretty contentious episode, and I'm happy to be here. My favorite part of this so far has been Ron saying, "Yeah, Seamus, sue me and see what those cartoons will do."
Oh my goodness!
I think that we're in for a show. Obviously, we hope Tim gets better soon, and if not, apparently there's a hostile takeover happening. I'm not sure who's going to win.
And by the way, I'll just mention this before you denigrate cartoonists. This was a phrase that was uttered at art school by the professors. They said the painters look down on the illustrators. They say they're not real artists. And the illustrators look down on the cartoonists and say they're not real artists, but no one tells a cartoonist that because a cartoonist can ruin your life. Ian Crossland.
Hi, Seamus.
Good to have you on.
Thanks for having me. Who's going to win tonight? Everybody's going to win. When people go to castbrew.com, that is, and buy their coffee, I think if we can get enough people, more people tonight to buy coffee than ever before, I think it's going to make a real statement.
Yeah, I think so too.
Here's another statement.
Make me look good.
You were wrong in your intro.
What was I wrong about?
The CEO of OceanGate's son died. It wasn't the CEO's son. It was a different.
Thank you for fact checking me.
It was another guy.
That's why you're here.
Pakistani businessman Shaz Dawood. I think I got his name right. And his son Suleiman. We'll talk more about it on the show.
Yeah.
I'm Ian Crossland. Happy to see you guys. Stay tuned. We got Serge Duprea.
Yes. Hi, I'm here, guys. Hopefully we'll keep this show on the rails. I think we're doing a pretty good job so far.
Yeah. And the good thing is that without Tim here after several nights in a row, no one's going to know if we don't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's not going to watch. He's never going to see this.
No, I mean no one. I saw last night's numbers.
Oh. Wait till you see tonight's. We're picking it back up. We're picking it back up. But
all right, let's get started, y'all.
Let's get started. Ian, I actually really appreciate you mentioning that because the information I had here was incorrect, cool. And I wouldn't want to spread anything untrue here
or send flowers to the wrong house.
Yeah, well, it's obviously a very, very sad story here. We've been covering this. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, so I'm going to read a letter that the OceanGate Expeditions Twitter account sent out earlier. We're not going to read the whole thing, but I think the first line is certainly worth repeating, given it has the names of all the people who lost their lives. They wrote, "We now believe that our CEO, Stockton Rush, Shazda Dawood, and his son, Suleiman Dawood, Harish Harding, and Paul Henry.
Hamish Harding.
Hamish Harding, that's my mistake. And Paul Hardy Nargalet have sadly been lost." So they go on to say that these men were explorers who had a spirit of adventure. This is, of course, a very sad story, and I think that we should try to keep reverence while discussing it. A lot of people on Twitter have been laughing at the fact that these people died because they're wealthy, and we discussed that a little bit on last night's show, so we probably don't have to retread that territory. But I want to open it up to you guys. What do you guys think about this? What do you guys think about the fact that the Navy says that they heard or detected that there was a hull implosion several days ago and didn't say anything until now?
Hull implosion.
Yes.
Because when I first heard you, I thought you said whole implosion.
No.
And that
Hull,
would have been...
Yeah. I'm not sure what that would even mean.
No, because a hull is...
A complete implosion.
Hull, like a complete... The hull cracked, and they found debris, I think, about a third of a mile from the wreckage of the Titanic, so...
The Wall Street Journal is reporting that this U.S. Navy technology that's used to find enemy submarines picked up on what they now believe was this implosion around the area where debris was now found.
And doesn't that answer the big question to at least one possible non-conspiratorial answer to the big question everyone's asking? Now believe. Now we found the debris. Now we know what that weird noise was.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Well, this is something we were talking about a little bit before the show, but there's something curious about the fact that they waited to release this information until after it was already made public that the debris had been found. And so people have been speculating about why that's the case. I can understand why they might not say anything because it's possible they didn't know initially what the noise actually was. And now that the debris has been found, they can confirm that it actually was the submersible imploding. And they would probably have some concern about dissuading rescuers from making attempts by telling them we heard something that very well could have been this craft being destroyed by the water pressure.
Or releasing information through the media when really these people have families who probably want some dignity and some privacy while they learn possibly that they've lost, family members.
So the Navy is claiming that I think it was the Navy, is that who it is, they detected the implosion on Sunday or shortly after they lost contact, I think maybe on Sunday. Yeah. And then they let a global initiative to search and rescue go on without telling people, hey, wait a minute. Maybe because they found, so I'm having a problem with this. It's a very emotional story. There's 5 people dead, which is, and their families and God, but I haven't seen the debris. I don't trust the news. If they're going to tell me that this thing, they know now it imploded, they're very almost sure that it imploded and they found the wreckage. Like, show me the evidence, man. I don't buy it. I don't buy this. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why this was mainstream
It's like you
news.
don't believe the government.
Yeah,
or something.
how weird
I don't
that
understand that. What is this? What is this that I've been invited to?
Crazy corruption scandals about the president's son, but all of a sudden this new piece of pop news takes over and they're trying to like shove it down my throat for 5 days.
So I'm curious, what do you think happened here then if you don't believe that this craft was actually destroyed by the water pressure or faulty construction?
For all I know, it's still down there, and they all died a really horrible, slow death, and they don't want to put that in the news.
What do you think their motivation would be for wanting to keep that out? They want
to raise morale. They want to be like, they all died painless, because I saw Mike Cernovich tweeted out, they all had a painless death. Don't worry about it. Everything's okay.
I remember they said that about the space shuttle. And that
the Challenger
was a lie.
Yeah. That's interesting that they would lie about something like that.
What happened with the Challenger?
They had a voice recording of the last minute because it started getting hot in there. It didn't just break up. It started getting hot in there. I'd rather not talk about it. We've had enough awful, you don't have to dredge up awful news from 35 years ago. It was, or whatever the hell it was.
Sure.
1984. I think it was, no, it was 1986. 86? I was in 2nd grade. Well, I think it was 86.
Hannah Claire, you made this point earlier about dignity, the fact that people had died, that they lost their loved ones, and there's a media fiasco around this. It's an interesting exploration because we want to look at these issues. We want to know what's happening in the world. And it's good that people were rooting for these individuals to live. The public, at least the pro-social segment of the public, who aren't just completely out of their minds and would celebrate the death of somebody simply because they're wealthy. We're rooting for this family. But I think you're onto something with what you're saying about the fact that there's a level of sensitivity that needs to be considered here. And it goes beyond simply saying, I acknowledge something horrible happened here. There's an element of discretion that is necessary.
Yeah, it reminds me of, and I'm loath to bring up a completely different political point, but when Biden withdrew troops from Afghanistan, right, we lost 13 Marines. Would you want those Marines' names to be released in the media, or would you want their parents to have a chance to hear it first, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing we're all outraged by tragedy, or we want to know what the end of this submarine saga is. On the other hand, real people have lost, and there has to be a slight time delay to deliver that information. Now, I don't know that that's necessarily the case here. Like we're saying, if the Navy picked up on some kind of sound, what is it going to do? Say, we think we heard something, but we're not sure, but maybe? Like, it doesn't necessarily serve. There's no reason to believe they didn't deliver that information to the powers that need to be, the Coast Guard, whoever's searching. Yeah. Again, I agree with Ian here. You have to remain a little bit skeptical. I think what we're seeing a little bit now is the question of why did we finally get this information today, that there is debris, that we don't think that there was an implosion, and what else is going on in the news media that would indicate this. This morning, the news alerts I was getting were saying, today is the last day that they would have oxygen. So there is a reason why this sort of hit its crescendo today. We knew after today, if they weren't found, things were bleak no matter what.
Well, I'll also say this. We know, and based on what you were pointing out earlier about the Challenger mission and the catastrophe there, that the media has covered up for organizations to make the fact that people died horrible deaths seem less tragic by claiming it happened quickly and painlessly. However, I will say one key difference is the media might have some desire or motivation to cover for NASA, whereas I'm not sure what the motive would be to cover up for this small organization that doesn't really seem to have any connections to state or media powers.
Especially when usually I feel like the federal government is very against independent exploration, right? I mean, this was all Elon Musk and Richard Branson's efforts to get to space. I don't think the federal government necessarily was rooting them on. They see that as their right and their exclusive territory.
Yes.
Again, private exploration of the sea, I think we stopped thinking about it because we became focused on space, but I'm sure there are reasons that people want to plunge to the depths of the ocean and see what's there. It really is a world unknown to us.
Yep.
And I don't think necessarily these people who have the money to do so were wrong for taking that risk. It's just an incredibly sad situation. I think it's hard to see these videos on TikTok or Reels or wherever where people are kind of laughing at it because you want to remind yourself that like, these are people who died and someone is grieving them.
And I'll mention this. I think you're correct in saying that when it comes to exploration of parts of the world that are currently uncharted, there is a nobility in wanting to take that venture on. However, in the coming days or weeks, there are going to have to be some questions asked about the particular risks that OceanGate took in their construction of this vehicle and placing people on it, and whether this was the best constructed craft, because there's been a lot of discussion about that, but maybe now's not the time.
I heard there was a waiver they signed, someone on Twitter, and this is all anecdotal, I don't have the tweet, but they said that they had ridden with OceanGate a year ago and to the Titanic actually and back, and they'd signed a waiver, and on the front page it was like, you waive just in case you die. And they said it said death 3 times on the front page. Could be hyperbolic, but they were pretty much like, I think maybe these people.
So I actually heard. So my friend, legal mindset, Andrew Esquire, YouTuber, did a very good video that I think he posted. 12 hours ago today, addressing potential legal issues that are raised by this tragedy, and going to your point again, because of, I think, what is generally a government hostility towards any kind of independence, and certainly big independence like this, he seemed to suggest that this is going to provide an impetus for more regulation. But I'm surprised that he said that, because the first thing he said in his video, and I think the video is great, is that there's a jurisdictional issue here. This is international waters, and part of the reason there is so little regulation is precisely because of the lack of a regulating and enforcing authority. So the fact that many countries, everyone knows that in the world of sailing, the nautical world is, if you have any familiarity at all with cruise lines, they're notoriously unregulated. They are scandalously unregulated. Everyone knows there's a problem. Everyone knows a certain number of passengers disappear, are killed, are robbed, are thrown overboard, and there is no accountability. The fact that we know that these things happen doesn't make them solved. They're not solved. So I don't know if this, but there is some one of the things that Andrew did point out was that you can sign a waiver. You can waive all kinds of things, but you can't. There's a level of negligence, of gross negligence, that you cannot waive away. By virtue of signing a waiver, that doesn't give you permission. Okay, now I can come into your treehouse. Great, welcome aboard, Ron. I'm going to shoot you in the head. You can't do that.
Yeah.
So there will be lawyers looking very hard at this.
Well, speaking of lawyers, the Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison actually warned Target about their obligations to LGBTQ individuals. And of course, we know that means the LGBTQ lobby. That's what they're referring to whenever they talk about this community. So this was not just the Minnesota AG. There was a coalition of 15 AGs, and they reached out to the CEO of Target to offer support after the Pride backlash in an open letter where they said, and I quote, and please stay sitting, we understand Target recently pulled some Pride merchandise from its shelves out of concern for worker and customer safety. The letter says, while we understand that
very dangerous merchandise,
extremely dangerous merchandise,
it's going to jump off the shelves and attack you.
Exactly,
and it could implode into a hole.
Oh, okay, I forgot.
So they released this letter where, of course, what they're saying to Target is, we understand, why you were afraid. Of course, the right wing in this country is just absolutely out of control. You remember those riots that lasted for months at a time that far right group must have perpetuated. We can't get to the bottom of it. But the Minnesota AG, Keith Ellison, wrote to Target warning that their decision to pull Pride merch, and this is from Fox, by the way, this is their wording, from stores encouraged bullying and will embolden hateful methods. So hateful methods and bullying. I would say if there was an example of bullying in this story, it would probably be from the LGBTQ activist who sent bomb threats to Target, but I'm curious to hear all of your thoughts on this.
Well, we never want to empower bullying in this country. Definitely the progressive left has never, ever tried to push its agenda in a manner that would constitute bullying. They would never do that. I think this is ridiculous. It is interesting that, it is a coalition of 15 attorney generals, and the Minnesota attorney general is there. You probably already mentioned this, but Target is based in Minnesota, so there's a certain amount of pressure to get in line, fall in line with your hometown. It reminds me of the Bud Light boycott in some ways, because initially it was the conservatives saying, we won't drink this, Anheuser-Busch, you've gone too far, you're pushing inappropriate things to underage children. And then on top of that, gay bars started boycotting Bud Light, saying, how could you not vocally support Dylan Mulvaney and everything else that this community represents? And so we're seeing the same thing here. Minnesota is now saying, why are you not doing more, even though we will not acknowledge that you've lost billions of dollars.
Exactly. And so, there's just so much to pull apart here. Firstly, Target obviously has a fiduciary responsibility to their stockholders to ensure that they're not tanking the price of their company and the valuation of it, so that the people who have invested their money in them aren't, completely SOL on that.
That's not something Mr. Ellison is particularly
concerned with, as it turns out. No, the obligation is to the LGBTQ community here. And what they were saying, of course, in the letter was that they understand that there was a legitimate threat to the safety of consumers at Target. No, it was the consumers who said they were no longer interested in what Target was pushing here. That's the problem. What they're upset about is the fact that people were willing to stand up to this massive corporation and say, actually, we're not interested in having you force this nonsense onto us and our families. And of course, they call that a threat to their safety. And then they try to turn around and say, this is a threat to the safety of our customers. This is a very textbook left-wing tactic to just project. What they are trying to do is have a predatory relationship with their customers, where they force any idea or perverse set of lifestyle choices onto those customers, and they do nothing about it. So they're the ones who are actually a threat to the safety of their customers. They're the ones trying to victimize them in a very real sense. When those customers turn around and leave, they say, well, the customers are actually being victimized by virtue of the fact that they're no longer shopping in our locations, because the only explanation for this is big, bad, right-wing terrorists or whatever other boogeyman they want to invent to avoid accountability here.
Yeah. I wonder, too, that it's just so arrogant of these attorney generals to not acknowledge that by telling Target, you have to keep this merchandise on your shelves for everyone to then take pictures of and share how it's not selling. I think one of the best things Alex Stein has ever done is go to Target and try on their tuck-friendly swimsuit, right? Like, they are...
I think Alex also feels that's one of the best things he's ever done too.
Yeah, I think
still burned in my mind, actually.
Yeah, you'll never forget it.
His feet has really changed since that experience.
But I just mean, when we, again, I'll draw back to Bud Light. What did we see for the weeks afterwards? Pictures of these stacks of Bud Lights not moving off shelves. And we saw more cases of Bud Light with these crazy coupons saying, basically, please, we'll pay you to take this. I can see on a number of levels why, as soon as this happened, Target felt like it needed to pull the merchandise and to say... But
was there really no aspect of bullying? And is this a complete fantasy? Is it the way you described it? Or was it?
It's a total fantasy. No, it's nonsense. Their idea of bullying is you didn't comply with what I told you to do. You didn't obey me. That's what bullying means to a leftist.
Were there even? For example, the school board, the bullying by parents at school boards.
The parents bullying the teachers.
So, playing devil's advocate, which I am often paid to do.
You're a lawyer, yeah, I get it.
If parents become unruly or they refuse to respect. Everyone gets 2 minutes to speak and you went over, or you're Matt Walsh and you're too effective and compelling, But there's a sort of an immediacy and there's a sort of a menace. This is pure democracy in action. But is there anything even comparable to that? Were there any pickets anywhere in front of Target stores? I bet there were.
I think people, it's possible, but my understanding is what they're really concerned about is just the fact that people have stopped shopping there and their stock prices plummeted. I don't know if they would be as concerned about protests.
But I think,
I think a lot of this is, I think a lot of what's happened with Target and a lot of what has happened with Bud Light isn't that there have been, right-wing organizations getting protesters together. It's just that ordinary people have said, we don't want this anymore and we're not going to purchase your product.
Well, not just that. We're not going to go to your stores. Whenever you go to a Target, what do you see? People there dragging their kids along because these are people who most of them are caregivers, and also people don't work anymore. So everyone's there with their kids. And all of a sudden, kids are looking at these displays and these bizarrely configured, articles of clothing and asking very awkward questions. And what they want to have happen is for the normal to become, your children should be exposed to this. Your children should ask these questions. And guess what? We'll even tell you how you should answer them.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And fortunately, consumers still have the power to boycott these organizations, and they would love to see that stop. Unfortunately, there are organizations that we don't have the power to boycott, segueing into our next story about the United States government and the Pentagon. So, you may have heard over the past several days while we've been taking a break from Timcast that the Pentagon had a little bit of an accounting error, which resulted in an extra $6.2 billion for Ukrainian military aid. I really wish that every now and again, one of these accounting errors could result in the American people getting tax cuts or money being returned back to us. But it's kind of fascinating how these mistakes seem to happen in one direction. So the Pentagon said Tuesday that they overestimated the value of weapons sent to Ukraine by $6.2 billion over the past 2 years. And I don't know, I'm sitting here thinking we can't afford not to spend an extra $6.2 billion on aid to Ukraine. And apparently they can't afford not to have it because we're still sending it over there. They still get to keep it. And there's absolutely no accountability. I mean, I can't imagine a strategy more foolish for determining how your national defense or even just expenditure is handled by putting it in the hands of people who pay absolutely no price for horrific mismanagement of those resources.
Well, that's the theme of our era, is no accountability. And certainly no one in the federal government is ever held accountable for things that they're quite rationally expected to be accountable for. I was saying before the show, as we were talking about this, that I'm surprised the Pentagon even bothered coming up with this story.
Yeah.
Since when do they even care? Since when do they need an excuse? Usually they just say, we just decided to send some more.
Well, they've failed their last 5 consecutive audits. I mean, the
and yet
Pentagon,
they're still in business.
Yeah, exactly. Can you imagine? Let me ask you this. As a legal expert, are you aware of any large corporations that have failed 5 consecutive audits and just been fine, business as usual?
Well, failing an audit is a funny concept. When audits...
There's that lawyer talk.
When audits, when questions are raised by audits, boards of directors have responsibilities to follow up on those. And they have a fiduciary obligation to shareholders to make sure that problems are addressed. So you're asking the right question. The problem with government is that it is not only a word for people doing stuff together.
Yeah, that's right. That's what government means. It's just when we get together. And
it's not even just a word for...
Remember when we all got together and accidentally gave Ukraine an extra $6.2 billion? When we all just got together and did that? That's what government is.
What I'm kind of wondering here is, one of the things I've kind of heard recently was that a lot of the stuff that was sent to Ukraine, it was actually the military was kind of happy to get rid of it. A lot of it was outdated stuff, and it gives them an excuse to replace those things with new and better stuff. And maybe
it's like a clearance sale, but for military.
Exactly. Right. Got to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Got to get rid of it by shooting it at, we're not shooting it. Of course, we're not shooting it. These people are shooting it to salvage their independence and their pride. I did not mean pride.
This story,
different pride.
But you did say this story reminds me. I don't know if it's a meme or whatever I saw on Twitter of like it comes up every tax season where it's like the government, you owe me money, me. Okay, how much? We can't tell you.
That's right.
Is it this much? No, to jail. Like
yeah, exactly.
This doesn't make any sense to me because the government gets to be like,
let's stick a
we
pin
misplaced $6 billion.
Stick a pin in that conversation because I think we will be coming back to it tonight again also.
I wonder if it's an inflationary thing. Like they gave technology over, which 2 years ago when they signed the paperwork, it's yours, was worth 6.2 billion less, and today they're like, oh, well, the value's now. Or if they're just priming people.
Can you imagine a business? Imagine Amazon calls you up and says, "Remember when you bought $40 worth of underwear?" Yeah, right.
It was 60.
More
crazy mistake.
Or just claiming that it was worth 60 after they sold it to me for 40. Right. Well, or if what they're doing is priming us for another announcement that they gave 40 billion of an accounting error.
See, for me, it's like, why? It's the federal government, right? If they had just been like, and then we decided to give them $6.2 billion more, they would have done that. To me, this means they knew that they were going to get caught for some reason. Like they only admitted it and got out in front of the story. The government does not do things afterwards.
But like you said, Seamus, what would have happened?
Exactly.
Oh no, we failed.
You
on
caught me. Let me see your wallet, sir. Like every single time. Like I said, they never pay any price.
On being like,
single.
What are you going to do about it?
That's exactly what I was about to say. Sometimes I wonder if there's a little bit of rubbing people's faces in these kinds of situations. I almost wonder, and I know it's a bit conspiratorial, but if they come out and they admit these things because they just want to confirm that you're not going to do anything about it, there's not really going to be any backlash.
Well, that's the FBI. That's the FBI. Yeah, we that whole secret court thing where you're supposed to trust us, and
that issues warrants and makes all kinds.
We absolutely blew that. I don't know. We were drinking. I don't know what it was. It was someone made a dare. But we took a lot of stuff, a lot of secret confidential stuff that we shouldn't have taken. But whatever, right?
Well, the FBI has admitted to far more horrific stuff than that too. I mean, FBI and CIA, when you just look at the things that they've leaked, you go, I'm glad that they were transparent about this, but not to get too sidetracked, hearing about things like, MK Ultra or Project Northwoods, any of these things that were going on behind the scenes that if the American people had known about them at the time, they might have actually attempted some kind of coup. And then you go, well, they're telling us now, and they're also telling us that they would never do anything so horrible again. So I guess everyone's just kind of roll over and obey the regime.
I've been thinking about secret police lately. Like it's secret police.
They've been thinking about it.
Well, they are. The FBI, the CIA, they're secret police. We've had them for 100 years. Secret police are okay if they're not attacking themselves, like if they're not attacking their own government. But when it starts to invade and attack, it's like an immune response. It's like, what do you call what's like HIV? It's attacks the immune system, immunodeficiency. So this is like an immunodeficiency when the secret police turn on itself. So like the fact that it's going after a Republican candidate for president, for instance, or whatever, tapping people's phones in the United States, like and the Nazis had a secret police that went after itself. They started going after their own people. So like I'm okay with allowing a CIA to exist like spiritually, even having a secret police force. I understand there is value, massive value to that, but to protect our species and our environment, but man, when it goes on itself, I don't know how to make it not go on itself either. If it starts, like how do you turn it around without having it gutted?
When you mean go in on itself, what exactly are you saying?
Like
there?
if it starts to arrest other people within the political system of the country that it's supposed to operate.
Well, this actually was most prevalent in the NKVD in the 1930s, and the astonishing thing that Stalin, among the many astonishing things that Stalin achieved, was he gutted the leadership of the NKVD.
What's the NKVD?
That was the predecessor of the KGB. Same exact thing. I mean, he would sometimes split them into different ministries, internal, external. But the bottom line is, Soviet secret police were turned inside out, and it had been understood pretty much, since Lenin and through the early purges of Stalin, that to be what they call the Chekist was to be a uniquely privileged person. You were the elite. And yes, from time to time, the number one guy would get his head chopped off. But being a dutiful Chekist was still a very secure. And then all of a sudden, those had, and it was an extraordinary implementation of power on Stalin's part to be able to do that and not result in a kind of rebellion there, because there were so many different internal monitoring systems of the internal monitoring systems that you never knew which circuit you were pulling on, which wire you were pulling on. So it can be done, and the more power, and in fact, the more powerful and invasive your security state is, the more likely that is to happen.
That is, that a strongman can start picking it apart without it realizing that it's being destroyed, or even capable at stopping itself from being.
Although I'm not sure that the CIA as such, or the NSA, or the FBI have really suffered any harm themselves from themselves. American security has, American citizens have.
Yeah. Well, and that gets back to
and
the
of course,
problem
Tim's
of
voice.
what we're discussing.
I think
Exactly. We know exactly what happened. But Ian, you were talking about these agencies turning on themselves. You were talking about some examples of that, and it goes back to what we were saying earlier about these organizations not really being held accountable. So the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, I mean, in theory, you could argue that, like, at the very least, the FBI may be a federal police force. Again, I don't love the idea. I'm not saying I'm in favor of it, but if you just wanted to make an argument for a kind of federal police force existing, what you would need to do is create a very strong incentive structure for it to not go off and do things that are against the interests of the American people.
And the Church Committee, which none of you will remember, but you've heard of, which investigated the MK Ultra stuff and the the domestic spying, was supposed to resolve that. And what they didn't count on was that Congress would completely drop the ball on its oversight. And also, what the post 9/11 security, and secrecy reforms, so to speak, the legislative permit that was given to the security state to essentially operate with a degree of comprehension that would have been inconceivable in the 70s when the church hearings took place, and which are incredibly invasive, and there's no accountability.
Yeah.
Do you think that we need these agencies in today's America? Like, should we terminate the FBI?
To your point, I can't imagine competing in the global world as opposed to the flat one, which
I was going to say we don't talk about that till the after show. All right,
world.
You saw what happened. All right, don't make it happen again.
I don't see how you could not have it, but on the other hand, I don't see how they must be accountable. And time to say the cliche, who watches the watchers?
Well, exactly. Well, and this is the thing, right? They are watching everybody else. So you look at the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, and all of the mass data collection that's going on, the fact that they have information on literally anyone who could ever potentially stand up to try to regulate them. It seems to me you're either going to need a squeaky clean person in politics, or someone in politics who doesn't care if they get exposed and have their life ruined, or somebody who's both of those things, or they're just going to keep doing whatever they want to do forever. Because even if you do find that person or enough people who fit that description, it's still a long shot. I don't want to be too black-pilled about this, but these agencies are incredibly powerful. There is a reason they were able to have the information come out to the American people that they were literally, with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, plotting against the United States by planning a false flag attack, or with MK Ultra doing secret experiments on American citizens, and still continue to exist, right? It's because they're pretty much impossible to get rid of at this point.
And the question of, let's say you were made king for a day, right? So you had the power to disband the FBI. That might not be such a great idea, because now you have a lot of people with a lot of sensitive information and a lot of powerful tools who are unemployed and are looking to sell what they know. They're looking to become freelancers. And we're not going to put bullets in the back of all their heads. The vast majority of them are respectable people, and they have families. They feel like they're doing their duty. I think we have all been disabused of the notion that they are, won't do whatever they have to do to maintain their jobs. And as I said last night, their pensions, and fine. But be that as it may, you just can't wish that away. And it is it's a ratcheting effect. Very hard to imagine how you loosen How do you loosen that? And by the way, we do have serious rivals on the world stage, as well as serious problems with crime and with, and with cybersecurity, both internally and externally, and corporate espionage. You do need sophisticated help. And government is very well positioned to do that. And I've never been the biggest libertarian in the world. Could I make? I bet if Tim were here, he could make an argument, along the lines of privatizing those kinds of services. If you're a corporation and you have information that needs to be protected, or if you're a person that needs to be protected, move out to Maryland along the border of West Virginia, and that's everyone can do that. But be that as it may, I think there's a very strong consensus. And by the way, this is another point: the vast majority of Americans don't know that there's a problem.
Yeah. Well, speaking of it, you were kind of mentioning these sophisticated tools of analysis. Well, there are some stories that we can get to the bottom of without very sophisticated tools, or even minds which are very analytical.
I think we were watching a very, very special segue happen.
Oh, we were watching a very special segue.
And beautiful.
Just you wait, guys. I almost stuck the landing, and then you had to make fun of me.
At the end of the show, please rate his best segues and his worst segues.
We're gonna make a timestamp exactly after the show. We're gonna do a compilation of my best and worst segues. Well, I'll just drop the name of the story. I'll just drop the title of the article here in the story we're going to talk about. U.S.-funded scientists were among 3 Chinese researchers who fell ill amid the early COVID-19 outbreak. Identification of 3 who worked at Wuhan Institute of Virology fuels suspicion for proponents of lab leak theory. That's quite an understatement. A prominent scientist who worked on coronavirus projects funded by the U.S. government, okay, do I have to keep reading, is one of 3 Chinese researchers who became sick with an unspecified illness during the initial outbreak of COVID-19.
And let's keep it unspecified, because
current and former U.S. officials.
Still on
so
YouTube,
maybe it's
right?
whatever Tim has. Maybe someone else had to take over his podcast for a day. I have no idea. But what I will say is this. We have had a number of conversations on this story about lab leak hypothesis versus it came from a bat that lived 1,000 miles away from where the virus first sprang up theory, which I guess a nickname we could give to that, shorthanded, stupid, the insane stretch. I don't know what else to call it. We have had conversations on this show about the fact that there are certain theories that we as the American people didn't have access to because information was withheld from us. This is an example of the American people having basically all of the facts that they needed to have to come to the correct conclusion very early on, but the media just continually gaslighting people about drawing the most obvious possible conclusion. The reason the term conspiracy theorist is so effective is because what it does is it generates an image in the mind of the person who hears that term of an individual who doesn't go for the most succinct, credible, reasonable, and simple explanation, but who instead will make any kind of logical leap or stretch to believe whatever it was they wanted to believe in the first place. Now, to me, that sounds a lot more like that description fits somebody who thinks that COVID sprang up in a population of bats that live 1,000 miles away from Wuhan, as opposed to having come from the virus factory where they were doing gain-of-function research in the city where the virus first sprang up.
For our good.
For our good.
Okay.
How can you question science?
I know. And with details now emerging, I mean, I just have to laugh. I'm glad that this story came out. I'm glad that this was published. I think this is valuable information for the American people to have. Did we need this? Did we need this information to come to the most obvious possible conclusion here?
Well, I think it is important that we start to find out
Agreed.
Who's funded by the U.S. government, including if Chinese researchers were being funded and getting sick. Were they working in the COVID factory, the Wuhan Institute? Yeah, they were working
factory.
at the Wuhan factory where they were working on COVID, and they got ill, being funded by U.S. government. I mean, it's the most obvious.
It's insane,
I think
right?
it's notable that it's coming from the Wall Street Journal, right? This isn't a fringe group that's reporting this.
Exactly what I was thinking is that, okay, is this going to be another Fox
No, it's not
Wall
Fox.
Street Journal,
It's
yeah.
not Newsmax. It's no one who.
Also,
who
it's
leads-
So frankly,
It's
I
not
don't
the-
believe it. It's Wall Street Journal.
But it's
I don't
not
think
the
there's
Wall
any-
Street Journal editorial page either.
Yeah.
It's the
they are presenting
news
it as
department.
fact. They feel as though they have the evidence to back this up. And I can't speak specifically to the Wall Street Journal, but most of these major mainstream outlets, we can kind of guess what their track record on this theory
Yes.
was, where they cited. The fact that this is being reported, I mean, we are 3 years out. A lot of people's attitudes towards the pandemic have really shifted, but it's notable that
I'm very pro.
you're for it.
Yeah, I think
you think it was a good time.
It was a
Changed your mind?
Looking
incredible
back on
You have to catch
growth
up.
opportunity.
Yeah.
You got to work out a lot. You're a bodybuilder now, right?
That's I
what
mean,
I've heard.
that actually
8
might
times.
be
Mr.
what they
Just
try to.
Google
They might try to convince the American people to be in favor of it, just so that they don't have to take accountability. Like, maybe this was a good. Maybe we needed this.
We
time
all get to
ourselves.
spend more time at home.
I don't think
Ron
Fauci had
became
enough
a
medals.
bodybuilder. No, but I think that's the thing you should take away. Yes, like you're saying, maybe we all already knew this information. Maybe this is drawing forth a conclusion that a lot of us had already assumed.
But the reason the answer to your question is no is that read that last sentence. The identity and role of the researchers is one piece of intelligence that has been cited by proponents of the judgment that that's actually not very good writing. Proponents of the judgment that the pandemic originated with a lab leak, and that is not an award-winning sentence, but
No.
it's still they
trying
don't actually take the position that this tends to prove, or this proves that it was always bullshit that it was anything
Yeah.
other than a lab leak.
the nature of their illness hasn't been conclusively proven.
Yeah.
So it's just a bunch of facts we're going to line up, but we can't say what happened.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, again, there's one extremely obvious
Now, Tim
explanation
would
here.
not appreciate if we got him demonetized.
No. So this is one of those things you are able to discuss, but we probably shouldn't push out further into other questions of the medical science that YouTube would.
And we're not questioning
frankly-
science. We're questioning the Wall Street.
We're
Yeah,
questioning the
my
Wall Street
problem
Journal.
is
When
with
I
the
talk
Wall
about
Street-
the medical science too, I think, well, there are certain elements of it that you're not allowed to discuss because that's, how science works. But I know that with this, the establishment is actually starting to admit that this is clearly true.
That's what I'm thinking.
And-
This is what the vibe I get. It seems like people are like, okay, we've kind of figured out what happened. And now these news organizations, I don't want to speak for all of them, but the ones that relied for so long on printing newspaper are failing. They don't have the income that they used to have, and they need to get to break the story. So one of them is going to be like, you know what, we're done with pretense. Print it first. Print it before the New York Times, print it before whoever, USA Today, just print it first. We'll be the guy now.
Yeah,
So-
I think you're right. There is in news media, there's a lot of be there first as fast as you can. And
Also, this is not a Democrat-centric story as such. This is the uniparty. This is the deep state. This is the administrators. This is the big government. So that there's a little bit more room for that kind of reporting. It's not like reporting on the Bidens.
yeah.
Yeah, and it actually makes the U.S. government look kind of bad, which might be good for other countries. So who's behind this news propaganda? I don't know.
they have to research who owns the Wall Street Journal then, right?
I wonder how much money BlackRock's put into the Wall Street Journal. Let's find out.
That's a good question. Yeah. Please look that up for us right now because that's certainly valuable information. I mean, I think I've pretty much made my point on this, that the explanation here from the get-go was unbelievably obvious. We've had a number of different people in media and in the channels of the United States government and actual official institutions that people look to as authorities throughout this entire pandemic come out and say that they were not either being honest with us from the beginning, but maybe a better way of putting it is saying they weren't being truthful, because that doesn't necessarily demand that we believe that they were being intentionally dishonest, just that what they were saying clearly wasn't true. So there are certain, I get
Our
the lawyer appreciates
I'll tell you
me
why,
saying that.
because you just hit on something that I actually had wanted to say before, but I'd forgotten, which was misinformation.
Information they want you to miss.
Oh, I like that.
Thank you.
Misinformation is a made-up word. There's disinformation. Disinformation is an affirmative attempt to lie to you about reality so that you, for policy reasons, for political reasons, okay. Misinformed. I was misinformed. They told me the show started at 7. It starts at 8. Someone made a mistake, or even someone did it on purpose. I was misinformed. There was never such a thing as misinformation. I mean, there might have been, the formative might have existed theoretically, but misinformation is something that was created in the social media era as a term to describe what might not be true what might not be truth, but to make it sound like those who repeat it are engaged in disinformation because it's rhymes with and it alludes to disinformation. But accusing someone of disinformation is almost saying that they're competent state actors or something. You don't want to say that. You want to say rather that they're
Interesting,
they're
yeah.
So that's what a lot of what we're talking about. That's the theme. And you mentioned this. You sort of mentioned it earlier. The idea is to get across an official narrative and to marginalize anyone who departs from it as being engaged in misinformation, not in misinforming people. Because when you misinform people, it's like I thought the movie started at 9.
Yeah,
Sorry.
exactly.
People make mistakes. No, it's because you're bad.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. It's a very good way of looking at it.
Thank you.
I think what everyone has to remember here is the media, social media platforms, and basically everyone in government, including people in government who are actually colluding with social media companies to have them censor people from those platforms, were claiming that their interest was in protecting the American people. Now, if it's true that you are genuinely just a seeker of truth who wants to use the best information available to protect people, then when your track record ends up revealing that you have been consistently incorrect about important details, which you punished people for speaking truth on, you'd imagine some kind of humility would be demonstrated and you would loosen your grip over the control of informational flow, or you would loosen your restrictions. And on some things they have. However, they still act with a degree of authority and certainty, which is not only unearned, but which has been thoroughly dismissed and refuted by the facts, I would say, has been entirely undermined by their own track record.
It's either that they were incompetent or malicious. And either way, I'm concerned with. That's why I just don't buy anything at face value anymore. It's really eroding my will to live, I will admit.
Oh, dude.
It's just happening slowly, like piece by piece is coming out of me, stone by stone. It's getting dark, like the future. I don't see a good future in 10 years with this AI revolution and the amount of stranglehold that the US government seems to be trying to keep on people. Like, just admit it sometimes, like let it out, let people live and thrive. Otherwise, I can't imagine anything good happening in the next 5 years geopolitically. I mean, not nothing, but I'm saying if they're willing to shut off people's bank accounts that are trying to live off the grid, like what the hell are we doing to ourselves? I'm very concerned, man. And by the way, the Vanguard Group owns 18% of News Corp, which owns the company that we were just talking about, the Wall Street Journal. Yeah, Vanguard.
Yeah, man. I hear a lot of what you're saying, and I think there are a lot of people in the audience who probably feel similarly about seeing a very bleak future ahead of them. But I mean, don't lose your will to live over it.
This is
you matter.
Shitcast,
I mean, you
not
matter as a person.
Grimcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Grimcast.
No,
Welcome
Ian,
home.
but Ian, like
Get some coffee.
That might be part of it. Is too much coffee.
Too
I think
much
I'm
coffee.
burning
But maybe
my-
Cass
Maybe you
Brew.
just got so blackpilled by that information
And I
about
will say,
Vanguard.
if you work in news media and you just consume these stories back to back to
It's
back
true.
to back to back,
It's true.
it is easy for it to become like you do. You have
Gets
to
dark.
research for the show. It gets really dark. On the other hand, you have to remember all the things that happen in your daily life that are worth continuing to push against the system for.
yeah, man. So
Man, I don't. It's just like a psychology hour. If I have kids, what are they going to be 20 years old and shipped off to the military to fight some war or like a defensive nuclear war, like against robots? What?
well,
If you decide not to push back, I mean, that's part of self-determination, right? Like you have the free will to be actively present in the life you have right now and to do what you can to make the world a place that you would want to pass down to your children. I think you have to resist giving up.
Yeah, man, because you can't lose hope. The establishment actually thrives off of you not having hope. When the people they're trying to subjugate don't see a path forward, that's when they win.
And that's part of the attack on religion.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. The attack on religion and the attack on the family as well. You mentioned something about children. Again, I don't have any kids, but from every single parent I've ever spoken to, it sounds to me like choosing to have children is a tremendous act of hope. You're hoping that there will be a better future. You're being optimistic and saying, I'm going to bring life into this world because I think it's going to be a good thing that I did it.
Was you mentioned to us before the show that you renewed your faith in your early 20s. Was this idea of hope and having a path forward something that did that for you?
That's a good question. I mean, really, growing up in what's considered to be a secular Jewish environment, although it was very strongly ethnic because of the immigrant component of my parents and grandparents, and then finding myself as someone who's own parents had not gone to college, and all of a sudden I was at Princeton. So I was on the very precipice of
in an elite school.
An elite school, and sort of supposedly the entree into the elite of the world, which is not what I learned much later, was that these schools mostly perpetuate networks. They're not there to invite you into their network, although if you want to de-self yourself enough to really be a member of the club, you could.
De-self yourself.
But that was precisely, that's actually a Jane Coleman. That is my wife's phrase, not that she ever uses it.
You know what Woodrow Wilson said? The purpose of academia is to make a man as little like his father as possible.
Yes, and that's why his name has been stripped off every building in Princeton. Ironically
I think
enough.
that's the one thing he said they'd probably love.
Right, but not
exactly. They moved
not
away
his
from
name.
their ideological father.
But the answer to the question is yes. I mean, looking at this strong identity that I had, and then looking at what really assimilating really meant, and the fact that I knew that I had an inherent belief in God and in the validity of the Jewish tradition as being something that was valid and meaningful to me. What I did was I went to Israel to study and became much more knowledgeable about my heritage, and actually took a couple of years between graduating law school and starting my career, what would eventually become legendary legal career.
Did religion bring some humility to you?
Imagine what it was like before. Can you just imagine?
I don't think I can.
No, actually, there's not all that's much more humbling than being 25 years old and have a degree from Princeton and from law school in Northwestern.
Yeah, that sounds really humbling, man.
And no. And then going to a beginner's yeshiva in Israel and learning basically the ABCs.
Yeah.
Stuff that my kids learned when they were 7 and 8.
Yeah.
So that was, but the humbling effect did pass, yes.
Yeah, no, of course. Well, and I'll mention this, and I think we could have a really fascinating discussion about this and about religion and faith on the after show. But this is one thing a lot of people are deprived of, is a religious education, because parents say, I want to let my kid choose when they're older. Your kid's going to make a choice when they're older, regardless. Give them an inheritance. Give them a faith. Teach them something, so that if they do choose it, they don't have to start from square one like they're like a little kid learning it all for the first time.
And my friend from Princeton days, Yoram Hazony, writes in his books about national conservatism and about conservatism. People are under a misapprehension. They think, well, why should my child be exposed to our particular religion? Sure, he has to have a religious education, but what makes our family's tradition any more valid? Stop asking a stupid question, okay? It's your family's tradition. It's what made you who you are. Do you like your parents? Do you like your grandparents? If you don't, it's probably because of Freud. Throw that stupid-ass tradition out the window.
Based. All right, yeah, we agree on that. We definitely agree on throwing Freud out.
We can save more of this.
Yeah, and I think we'll save more of it. Well, one thing I would say to people, too, is like when you start learning about like Christianity and Catholicism and decide to become Catholic, then don't feel free to not do the same thing your ancestors did.
I just knew that blame the Jews card would be played.
We'll talk about it on the after show. We'll talk about it in the after show.
Let me give you a touch more of the black pill before, and maybe we can carry the rest on to the after show.
Because the next story is a black pill, so let's get both of them at once.
I gained a faith in God 10 years ago or so, 15 years ago. I started to feel it. I was like, okay, cosmic microwave background radiation, radio telescopes can see this web of radiation. I'm like, maybe this is God, or part of, maybe I'm seeing like an after effect of it or something. But then I'm like, okay, the last week, I was like, oh, geez, good and evil. People are like, good triumphs over evil. And all the movies, good triumphs over evil. And I'm like, you know what? I think most of the time, evil triumphs over good because it's willing to destroy, and then it just tells people it was the good guy. And I think that's the history of humanity. So even if you believe in God and all these things that we're supposed to believe in and have faith, it's like, then what? We're going to perpetuate this cycle of evil taking over again, and then brainwashing everyone to think that they were the good guys again.
Wrong! It's so pessimistic. We'll get into it on the after show.
Thank you.
We'll get into it on the after show, because we have other black pills that I have to feed people right now. Otherwise, I'd want to stay on this topic, so we will flesh it out later. But speaking of humility, we've got a story about Hunter Biden here, the most humble member of, I guess we could say, our royal class in the United States at this point, especially when you look at the way that they're treated. I mean, no, effectively, he's royalty. People, it's one of the number one critiques of monarchy, and it's one of the number one reasons people supported democracy. What happens if you're in a monarchy and the king just has an absolutely horrible family, you end up being ruled by complete degenerates. Well,
Get Robin Hood.
that's not a what if, all
Well,
right?
I mean,
That's
there's
literally
certainly
what is happening to us right now in a democracy.
Plenty of depravity in the history of the Roman Empire, right?
Amen.
I mean, these
Yeah.
guys, they filled up the history books with some pretty sleazy moves. But we have our own royal family.
But we wouldn't want them
Exactly.
to get all the glory. We would also want to destroy the reputation of American people.
Well, exactly. So we have elites in this country. This is something Ian and I talked about quite a while ago. And what I said is the way I define elite is someone who will not pay any consequence for their actions. That's basically how an elite is defined in a system which is as corrupt as ours is. And when you're looking at somebody like Hunter Biden and our next story, which is the fact that IRS whistleblowers actually came out, and not just one, but two of them, and alleged that there was political interference in the Hunter Biden investigation.
Talk about information I didn't need
exactly.
confirmed, although
This is exactly what I was saying earlier with the lab leak hypothesis, right? There's just story after story after story of the conspiracy theorists being proven right. Information that we were already well aware of. I appreciate these guys coming forward. I agree that this stuff has to come out and it's good that they're talking about it. But the fact is, nobody thought this was going to be impartial or unbiased. Under the Obama administration, the IRS was specifically targeting conservative groups. This has been a biased organization for a very long time. It didn't start with Hunter Biden. And if it did start with Hunter Biden, it was so blatant and obvious that basically everyone in this country was already in a position where they'd be capable of hearing it without these whistleblowers. That said, we're glad they stepped forward. They should be commended and they should be thanked. The Justice Department in Delaware U.S. Attorney's Office went out of their way to hamper an IRS investigation of Hunter Biden's taxes by consistently slow-walking the case, preventing enforcement actions by the IRS, and tipping off actions related to the investigation to Biden's attorneys in advance, according to a new whistleblower testimony released Thursday by the House Ways and Means Committee. Now, just a show of hands, who in the room is surprised by this?
cricket sound effect.
Yeah, exactly.
It's weird when there's a story where the IRS are the good guys. Like the IRS are like, we're just trying to do our job.
The people disobeying the IRS from inside of the IRS were the good guys.
But it's the Justice Department and Delaware Attorney General's office that are slow walking this investigation.
But they have been. I mean, the mere fact that they never acted on any of this stuff. I mean, you know, that's the dog that didn't bark. I mean, it was obvious. And I mean, and apparently everyone knew that that was a private franchise of the Biden family. But, I mean, this is not news to anyone.
Yeah. Well, and you look at the fact that Biden, Hunter Biden, that is, specifically, failed to pay about $1 million in taxes. And I'm asking you, as a lawyer, if I, you know, a nice guy like me, failed to pay the government $1 million that I owed it, do you think I would get 2 misdemeanor charges? I'd be able to plead down to that?
I think you would get 2 misdemeanor charges on every square inch of your body. And the felony charges would be lodged in other parts of your body. That would be less visible.
Yeah, no, okay, that's a colorful way of describing it. Now, let me ask, what if you were my lawyer?
Then you wouldn't even get the 2.
All right, perfect. Yeah, well, maybe that was Hunter's mistake. He didn't hire you.
You would get a Congressional Medal of Honor.
I mean, I think it's worth noting that he admitted.
I'm surprised Hunter didn't, to be honest.
I mean, it's coming. He hasn't gotten it yet.
There's no such thing as a law firm anymore that works for both Democrats and Republicans. That's over. So
yeah,
we are. I don't know if you might have picked up on this Harmeet Dillon thing, but we are a Republican law firm.
Is there really none? There's no impartial ones?
For all practical purposes, that's.
Jeez.
I mean, in the upper echelons. I mean, it might be in local politics that it's still more, unpolitical. But
is that just since Trump got in?
Trump was the turning point. Yeah, I would say so.
Sorry, Hannah Claire, what were you saying?
I was just gonna say, I think it's worth noting that this whistleblower testimony was pre-scheduled, I'm assuming. So they always knew that they were going to testify on the 22nd. And earlier this week is when Hunter Biden accepts his plea deal and is like, yes, I did do something wrong. We're not going to talk about it anymore. That means they knew this was coming. That makes me think, what else is going to come out? Again, I always think anyone in these positions of power or privilege try to get in front of the story. So if Hunter accepted the plea deal on, what was it, Monday? what other whistleblower testimony are they trying to prevent from moving forward? Because his attorney specifically said, with this plea deal, my understanding is that the investigation is closed. Like, now we stop. Now
Was
we
it ever
don't ask
open?
any more questions.
Was it ever open?
It's a good. It's true, but it is interesting that his attorney's position is, now you stop asking questions. Hunter took the guilty plea. We're not going to talk about it anymore. And obviously, I don't think most of the American public agrees with that. We've referenced it a couple of times, this idea of a multi-tier justice system in which Hunter Biden is allowed to, every report that I read after his plea came out was he is not expected to serve jail time. He's also got this gun charge hanging over his head that is punishable by up to 10 years in prison.
And he's a white man.
You think he's going to get
true.
it? Yeah.
No, there's
That's why.
no
Must be why.
expectation in our country that he will go to jail. And the fact that all of us can look at each other and say it's extremely unlikely that Hunter Biden's going to go to jail for something that anyone else in this room would be convicted and punished to the full extent of the law is crazy. How can Joe Biden, who's presenting himself as a man of the people, all the unions support him,
Middle class Joe, he calls himself.
Ignore his way out of this? His son is not going to serve a sentence that everyone else in this country would have
He
to.
played the nepotism card when they asked him.
This
He
is
was
the
like,
rub your nose in it.
I love my
exactly.
son. His description as the commander-in-chief of the military when finding massive corruption with a family member was, it's my family member.
I love my son.
Like, dude, you're the commander. You have no choice. You have to put your family member in prison. Like, if they violate authority, you do what's right for the country. That's
Amen.
why you have the role.
No, amen. Well, and I'll
He's a
also
good
say
boy.
this:
He's a good boy.
for anyone who would argue that he should not allow for Hunter to be locked up because that's his son and he's in this position of authority. Well, you know what? If your son doesn't care for the boundaries that you have to set as a leader enough to not break the law and embarrass you immensely when you're the president of the United States, then what do you owe him?
Right.
Lock him up. Now, of course, we know what Hunter owes him, and it's allegedly 10%, but...
Well, I think it's worth noting that Hunter didn't file taxes in 2017 and 2018. There is no way on earth that Joe Biden wasn't considering running for the presidency at some point in the years before that. That means he knew that he was potentially going to run. Every person who's run for office goes through intense scrutiny. He couldn't have looked at Hunter and be like, did you file your taxes? That would be really good for me if you did that.
Well, Hunter's the smartest guy he knows.
That's true.
Which actually, the thing is, that actually might be true. Hunter might be the smartest person Joe Biden knows.
Which is scary.
Which is scary, but I think that might be true when you just look at his circle.
I think that Joe is going through a state of mind right now where he's like, oh, I did this to Hunter. It's my fault for putting him in Burisma. I'm going to eat this one. Just let him go.
He's not. Joe Biden isn't being punished for it. Hunter Biden's not being punished for it. So no one's being punished for this. And again, this is not the way anyone else would be treated. And I think there is no way voters can look at the Bidens and say they are of the people. They are not.
By the way, I mentioned this earlier, but do you remember when he claimed that people called him middle class Joe? They didn't mean it as a compliment, man. Like, no one ever called you that ever. First of all, no one in American politics is going, oh, look at the person the middle class can relate to. Let's laugh at them. That's not how this country works, okay? People who hate the middle class still pretend to love it while denigrating it, stripping all of its wealth away, and insulting its values. No one ever called Joe Biden middle class Joe. But you were going to make a point, and I so rudely interrupted.
No, I don't think so. I think I might have. I do have this ability to make a face that looks like I'm about to make a point. But if I was, I don't remember what it was. No, actually, the point was.
I knew it.
I have to come up with a point now, right?
He's going to filibuster till he has a point.
The point was that there was never any concern whatsoever on his part whether or not he filed the taxes because he knew that he's never been held accountable for anything. And he will not be held accountable for anything because they have the system absolutely stacked.
Right. What if this was Donald Trump Jr.? What would we hear from the media? What would we hear from Congress? What would we hear from the executive branch?
There's no way he wouldn't do prison time. We were being told, like Adam Schiff was saying that he had information about Trump Jr. and that he was going to be thrown in prison. And we were hearing all of this nonsense from everyone in the media about how the walls were closing in. They were closing in on Donald Trump and they were closing in on his family. And of course, what we ended up finding with the investigation, with the Durham report, was once again something that we all knew, which was that the deep state was politically motivated and they were attempting a soft coup against a sitting president. So when somebody who is anti-establishment ends up attaining the highest office in the country in an unbelievable and unprecedented feat by being elected president as an outsider. And then the deep state does everything they can to subvert the democratic process and unseat that person. And everyone in the media repeats a narrative, which we all know was a total farce, to the point where they convince the American people to believe things that are factually untrue, to the point where 60% of Democrats, intuitively, to the point where 60% of Democrats said in a YouGov survey that the 2016 election was tampered with by Russians, in the sense that they were literally retallying vote totals. Now, no one in the media openly said this. They just very strongly implied it for several years. And so that's the treatment that you get when you're an outsider trying to enter into the establishment. When you are in the establishment, you can do whatever you want and you will not pay any price. And if you do, it'll be a slap on the wrist so they can say, see, we're impartial. Hunter Biden did end up catching charges. He was prosecuted in a court of law because we gave him 2 misdemeanors for something you'd be spending decades in jail for had you done it.
Yeah. I mean,
we're done.
You can speak to this.
That's everything.
That's all of it. I think you probably speak to this better than I can, but with a plea deal, both sides come to an agreement. Someone says, this is what we're willing to offer you. And that means the U.S. government was like, Hunter, we're willing to offer you no jail time for this. Like, that's bizarre to me. This seems so crazy. It's not unexpected. He is the president's son. On the other hand, I just think voters should remember this as they go towards November 2024. Absolutely agreed.
Absolutely agreed. And
very, very, very few voters will be swayed by it.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know about that, because it was something like 10% of voters, according to a poll published by the Washington Examiner, said had the Hunter Biden laptop story not been covered up, they wouldn't have voted for Joe.
I just think it's worth
pointing
out.
So I do think some people will care.
Yeah.
But that's actually very few, though. At 10% may
It was
have
of people who voted Democrat,
right.
I believe.
I understand that.
It's like 7 to 10. I want to double check on that.
And it might be that might have made a difference in a couple of swing states. But at the end of the day, what we are saying is that 90% of Democrats would have shrugged their shoulders.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Well,
and
we know that.
they'll shrug their shoulders as many times as possible.
And also,
agree. You just need to wake enough people up.
Referencing polls is risky because you got to find out how many people. It might be that it was like 1,000 people were asked and it was 10% of 1,000 people said. And the question might have been asked like, had you known that Hunter Biden's laptop, something, whereas opposed to if they just seen the laptop 2 weeks ago, it wouldn't really have. But when they're looking at the piece of paper with the question on it, they're like, yes.
I just think Hunter Biden cumulatively.
That's fair, but I do think, I agree with you that polls are imperfect, but I think when we have the information, it's important to do something with it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think just cumulatively, we should look at Hunter Biden. We should talk about Navy, his daughter, who is also, he's ignoring. Like, I think we should all look at everything Hunter Biden does and say, this is the child that Joe Biden raised.
Yeah, well,
and just, maybe it's not enough to persuade every voter, but I think.
But the real story, though, is notwithstanding the serious character flaws of Hunter Biden, and many great families have had seriously depraved children, and a great deal of wealth can have that effect on even the best of families, and especially when it's wealth generated by corruption.
Yeah.
But the real story, going back to our theme, is this is what elites can get away with.
Yes, it's what elites can get away with. And I'll also add this. It's not just that Hunter Biden was raised in an extremely wealthy family. He was raised in an extremely wealthy family, and his father is a coward and a phony.
His dad also probably wasn't around very much. I mean, if he worked for 40, 50 years in Congress, he's been in Congress since the 70s, right? That's a long time to be spending 28 days a month away from your family.
He's from Delaware. He took the train home every night.
Yeah, he took the train. Middle class Joe took the train home every night. Yeah, that's what he claimed.
Oh, that's good.
They called him middle class Joe, and he took the train home every night, and he fought corn pops.
How lame is it to give yourself a nickname?
Bad boys. He gave himself a nickname. That's what they called me, man. They didn't mean it as a compliment, man. It's like, okay, well, let me tell you something, Joe. This is what happens to you, by the way, when Hunter is the smartest person who you know. Biden was in India alongside the Indian Prime Minister, and he raised his hand to his heart because
in Washington.
He was in. Oh, I'm so sorry. He was in Washington, but they were. You're absolutely correct. Yes, you have the presidential seal right there.
Points off as host of Timcast.
You're never coming back on this show. You're out.
I'll just wait for Tim to return.
I'm the new host.
I just know that Tim would just.
Tim would have lost his mind.
His beanie's
But
off.
Here's well, maybe Hunter's the smartest guy I
lost
know at
his
this
voice.
point. I've just completely crashed and burned here.
It's going great.
No.
Okay, deep
I
breath.
wanna-
Try
yeah.
again.
Woo! All right, so we're gonna start again, and we're gonna edit this. Okay, all right. No one's ever gonna see this happen.
do it in
All right,
post.
so this is what happens when Hunter Biden is the smartest person you know. Joe Biden was alongside the Indian Prime Minister. He raised his hand to his heart because he expected that they were going to play the U.S. national anthem, and they didn't. They played the Indian national anthem, of course, and Joe Biden stood there and then slowly started to lower his hand when he realized.
Oh man,
Look at that.
What a champ.
that's why video cameras are cool.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
this is
man.
going to be the thing that's going to make people realize that Joe is not who they think he is. I think it's seeing more and more gaffes. But I mean, it's like a gaffe a day.
It's multiple
He's a
gaffes per
machine.
day. We
He's a
see like
machine. I can't
one.
keep up, dude.
Yeah. Remember when he said he broke his leg because he was
Ron doesn't
grabbing his
think that'll
dog's
make a
tail
difference.
getting out of the shower? It's like, I don't know. Dude, this man got elected, and then I believe it was just right after he was inaugurated, he told us he broke his leg because he tried to grab his dog's tail while he was getting out of the shower.
Yeah, it
and
was his foot, right?
I like to imagine most Americans were looking at that and going, oh my goodness, what have we done? But I actually don't think so. I think
A lot of them
they
were
kinda didn't
thinking
care.
like, "Thank God Trump's not in office."
No, he might have broke his leg when he
Trump-
tried to grab his dog's tail getting out of the shower. It's
But
like,
it would be
it's not
worse
even-
if Trump was in office. I think
Exactly.
that's a lot of the thoughts right now. Is very scary.
It is very.
Ron has a very grim face.
Tell me more. How much do you love Joe Biden on a scale from 1 to 100? I know love is a vague word, but how
I
much
have no use for Joe Biden. I mean, 1 to 100 is too granular.
do you think that there's any
1 to
value?
10, he gets a 2. There have been worse tyrants than Joe Byron.
Joe Byron? I like to
Well,
tyrant.
I
Doesn't
think
that, but
Bi-
that
now,
doesn't
but-
even make him
but-
worse because it's like if you're going to be a
Byron-
tyrant, do it. You know, he's so mediocre. He's a wannabe
He's a
dictator.
mediocre dictator.
He's a mediocre dictator. I think you should be a proper dictator.
Well, that's the thing, though, is that he's a dictator who you can buy, okay, as opposed to those dictators who you can't even buy because they
That's a fair point. The,
Yeah, I
the
think-
dictators who like own the people with money as opposed to the ones who are owned by the people with money. Very good point.
I
Very
get
good
this
point.
vibe, and I don't have a reference that he's like functioning as a dictator, but doesn't realize it.
Yeah,
Is that-
I don't know. I think he realized it. I think he's glad. Remember when he said he was losing his patience with us? Like, I'm losing my patience, man.
Well,
Like, what
okay.
do you mean your patience? Your memory extends 5 seconds into the past. There's
Okay,
no.
listen.
It's not possible for you to
He
lose your
has-
patience.
But he's been a senator, not just a mere member of Congress, which is only a couple of clicks above being a milkman, okay?
It's below being a milkmen are useful. They bring us a product that we use. They're good people.
Yeah, good point.
Speaking of which, I just spilled water on this keyboard.
Flip it upside down. That's the best
I'm
thing.
so angry. It's
But
okay.
the-
Did you ever see Tim in a million years?
Tim would have
Spilling
never spilled
on
water
his-
Can you believe that?
live on the show.
He actually hasn't.
Hey, Ian, can
He
you
actually
hit
hasn't.
that
No,
one,
I
Serge?
got
You
it.
know
I
why
got it. I
Tim
got it.
lost his voice?
Look at
Is
this. L.
I think the
he was
thing is,
excited.
Seamus gets a big ego, and he thinks, I can do this show, Tim. You don't
Then
see
I
them
move my
after
arm,
the
I
show every
smack
night.
it.
He's like, you should have done this. You should have
Oh,
done
not
that."
only that, he
And
saw
Tim was
Jack
like,
last
It's
night.
worse than that. I
Ja-
got him
Jack-
sick. Actually, I coughed in his drink. I said, I'm going to be the host next time.
He sees.
Now
It
he's
was
just
my
spilling
actual my
water.
Also
plan was to
comes in
spill
and
water
he's-
on the keyboard.
You know, he's a king. He comes in. He absolutely has the moves. Seamus is thinking, obviously anyone could do this.
I said it's child's play.
Turns out it's harder than he thinks.
No, I didn't.
I mean, I think we are there. I'm going to return to the point here because we could talk about endless number of Joe Biden gaffes. My personal favorite was when he was in Ireland and said, "I don't want to go home." That's a rough statement.
Did he say
from
I don't
someone
want to
who-
go home when he was in Ireland? He
I
also
can't
said
remember-
he's not Irish because none of his relatives are drunk or in jail.
Well, it's rough. And if you're black, if you don't vote for Joe Biden, you're not black. I
Yeah.
mean, there's rough stuff coming out. Is this enough, though? We're sort of returning back to the same point. Will voters look at this guy and say, we can't keep going? He is unpopular. There were polls that indicated a majority of Democrats felt he was too old to run again. Nonetheless, the Democratic Party seems to think that they're going to, pick him as their nominee. At what point do we look at him and say, nothing you can do matters because you are going to have the establishment behind you?
I'm in that point right now. But I also think hating someone is not the way to make a better world. Like a lot of what got us here was Trump derangement. People that couldn't stand Trump, they'll vote for anything else. So if people hate Biden that much that they'll vote for anything else, could be even worse. It could be exponentially worse.
No, and that's why. The reason
interesting.
that I say he's not a tyrant is, and before you had your continence prop over here, was that he's not a dictator. He's a crook, and he enjoys having power so that it can enrich himself. He's been a senator for a generation. Then he was vice president, which is a job where you get lots of quirks. Quirks?
Quirks is an interesting word for that.
Yeah, but it's completely the wrong
maybe?
Perks.
You get lots of perks and queer perks. That's what I was thinking.
That's it.
Going back.
It is Pride Month.
You get a lot.
But the point is, he's used to being the boss. He's used to being the man, and he's risen to seniority in the Senate. Therefore he is impatient. He is short with people. He's not bright, so therefore he uses authority as a proxy for the ability to convince people. And if we all should take a look, everyone, before you go to bed tonight, look at a video of Joe Biden from the 70s or 80s. This was a very, very articulate man. Not brilliant and not well-spoken as such, but the point is if he's articulate, he's well-spoken. But he had the tools to do the job. And then he ran out of gas. But what he became was we have a word in Yiddish, a golem. He became a zombie, an effective zombie in whom, a new SD card could be placed every morning with that day's, where to stand. And he has all those, many years of authority. But
when do you think he ran out of gas? I'm just curious about the timeline.
During the Obama administration. I think you could see one man coming in and much less of a man coming out.
Yeah, he used to talk really fast and sharp. Even in 2006 in those debates with Obama and Hillary Clinton, man, he was. I didn't like him a lot. But he was on fire.
Chopped liver out of Paul Ryan.
Yeah.
But then he would turn to the
so?
camera because the way Ryan was terrible. And Biden, they had, and by the way, whoever coaches the Democrats on debates years ago, they have a thing about smiling. A really obnoxious thing about smiling. I remember Biden looking into the camera with these phony pearly whites.
Yeah.
And just smirk. And boy,
always been phony.
Oh my gosh! But Ryan was helpless. Ryan was like a deer caught in the headlights. You don't think so?
Yeah. Biden?
Ryan.
Well, look, it's been a long time. I mean, this was the 2012 cycle. I was pretty young. I was still in high school.
06, 07.
No, he's talking about Paul Ryan versus
you're
Joe
talking
Biden. I remember watching it, and at the time, I thought that Ryan did better because I wasn't really impressed by Joe Biden, but that also could have been my political bias and the fact that I was 17 at the time. But we've got another story here that I want to try to push into. Pixar, the beloved children's film producer, which for a very long time couldn't seem to miss, has been doing worse and worse over the years, and many people are speculating it's because of wokeness. Well, now their new film, Elemental, has absolutely bombed at the box office, doing worse than any of Pixar's films have ever done, and it just happens to feature their first non-binary character. So are those two things related? Is this just a product of the new marketplace and streaming services? It's certainly possible, but I just want to start by highlighting some of the figures here. Firstly, Elemental opened to about $29.5 million its first weekend, which is the worst opening in Pixar's history. To be clear, Toy Story made $29.1 million its opening weekend back in 1995, and it had a $30 million budget, okay? So accounting for inflation, Pixar's first film, when they were a totally unknown studio, which did not have hit after hit after hit and a well-proven brand, blew this current film absolutely out of the water. Elemental, compared to Toy Story's $30 million budget, had a $200 million budget, and not to belabor the point, made the exact same amount its opening weekend as Toy Story.
In face value numbers.
In face value numbers. I'm not talking about real income. I'm not talking about real revenue. I am not talking about inflation-adjusted numbers. I am talking about the actual raw figures.
So they need to have 10 opening weekends just to break even on the production budget. Forget the marketing.
Yep. That's just the production budget. And so...
And money's not free anymore, by the way.
No, it is not.
So there's
Interest
cost of
rates are going
capital.
up.
I watch a lot of these videos about guys talking about what representation and equity and diversity have done to Disney and to Marvel, and what very few of the people are talking about is the cost of capital. It's not enough to break even. When you break even, you're saying that the 3 years that we spent nursing this $500 million on this project,
Yep.
we didn't lose it. Well, actually, you did lose it because the interest on $500 million in the last 3 years is real money. I mean, for guys like you and me, it's real money. For you, not so much. But
Yeah, no, not Ian. He'll be fine. But no, even for these massive companies, I mean, this is another example, and probably the worst example, at least for Pixar, in a trend that we've seen over the past several years. And part of it is these streaming services and the fact that people know that if a film doesn't really catch their interest all that much, they don't need to take the kids to see it opening weekend. They can see it later on. Yeah. But also there is an element, I think, of wokeness, political correctness, and trying to push leftism in children's media that has affected the revenue that a lot of these companies are seeing. So an example we saw about 1 or 2 years ago, I believe, was the Buzz Lightyear spin-off film that was released, and it did abysmally. And people were saying that this wasn't a product of the fact that there was a lesbian kiss in the background of the film, and parents were totally fine with that, and they chose not to see it for other reasons. And it's true that some people might have chosen not to see the film for other reasons, but the reality is 2 of the top 10 highest earning children's films of all time are Toy Story films, right? And then they release a spin-off film, and I'm not going to go as far as to say it bombed, but it performed very poorly given that franchise's track record. And people may want to argue, if they're on the left, that the fact that there is a lesbian kiss in a Toy Story movie didn't affect its marketability or whether parents would choose to take their children to see it. But I think that's flat on its face absurd. And I think the idea that parents were in no way affected by a non-binary character being in this children's film is equally absurd, even if streaming did play a role.
I started out wanting to ask a different question, but I think I've answered that one, and I have a new question. Mm-hmm. My original question had been, at the beginning we talked about Target and, middle America not wanting to take their kids into a Target store because of the freaky things that they're selling. And now we're talking about middle America not wanting to take their kids to a movie theater because of the freaky things they're selling.
Yep.
And in the middle, we talked about how Americans don't give a shit. They'll just vote Democratic no matter what. And Democratic has completely embraced, the Democratic Party has embraced this. There's a disconnection here. The answer seems to me to be that general feel-good political allegiances and voting are hard to dislodge. And even though we can always find and do always find social media sharing of footage from footage. The old man said footage. We developed it in the dark
Film.
Okay. The video of the, family-friendly drag show, and you're wondering, what the hell family? What parents are taking their kids? So there are some, but by and large, at the end of the day, most normal Americans will even vote Democratic, will even believe the media and the implausible stories that they come up with about origins of COVID. When it comes to pushing this sexualization, even forget whether or not it has to do with homosexuality or transsexuality or any of that stuff. Sexualization of children. People still have, I think, normal people, and that's still the majority, an inherent revulsion. Why does my kid have to be involved with this at all?
Agreed. I think that's the right way of putting it. It's a revulsion. A person doesn't have to go through like an intellectual rationalization for why they're not taking their kid to see that. They just go, that's disgusting. I don't want to show that to my kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They feel it in their gut and they say, this isn't for our family, and they do something else. They don't need to explain it to themselves. And I think that's the hard thing about modern culture. For a lot of parents, they're being pressed to say, but why wouldn't you do this? Why won't you do that?
Right, and they don't have a religious doctrine to fall back on because they don't go to church anymore and they don't observe, the tenets of their religion. And yet their souls are screaming within them.
Amen.
That there is right and wrong in this world, that there is...
Certainly.
Call it natural law, call it God's, but there is morality, that there are things that matter. There are values that are not malleable. And people, are embarrassed to be associated with a religious rationale for having those feelings, because what could be less fashionable?
Well, and I think this is why it's so important to the alphabet people to go after children, because it is true, as you said, this is written on man's heart. He understands this. There are certain things that are wrong. And when a child sees something grotesque for the first time, they're going to respond as they are naturally inclined to. I'm not saying everything that we feel internally is indicative of a moral reality. Sometimes we're wrong. But in general, especially when it comes to sexually perverse behavior, when someone's exposed to it, they recoil. They find it to be disgusting. So the reason they want to show it to children is because what they're effectively doing is a kind of perverse exposure therapy, which we usually call grooming. But of course, because the left wants this particular form of grooming to continue, they're not allowing people to call it that. But that's exactly what it is. We need to try to expose children to this and then gaslight them out of following that initial internal sense of revulsion towards the perversity in front of them.
And it doesn't have to even be perversity. As I said, most normal young children are uncomfortable with outward displays of what we might call romantic affection. They don't really want to see mommy and daddy kissing. A kiss is okay. They don't want to see you making out with your spouse. They do not want any part of that.
As they shouldn't, like an adult wouldn't. But if you wanted to create a world where like adults were just making out in front of each other and in front of kids and being weird,
then you'd go to San Francisco.
You'd go to San Francisco. No, but that's what these groomers do. They try to expose children to it as early as possible,
so it becomes normal to them.
It becomes normal to them. Exactly.
I think it's also important to mention that a lot of the people that are performing in drag and et cetera, and in these environments. I mean, I was a DJ for years, and I've been around a lot of the gay community. Say what you will about it, but they don't feel comfortable doing this. They don't want children to be around like that, and a lot of them are in the situation where they're essentially being forced by people that are. Well,
I represent a couple of organizations. One is Gays Against Groomers.
Yes. Okay. Great people.
And these are real homos. In other words, these are people who they're activists.
Certainly are. Yes,
it is a big part of their identity. There's like an entire different conversation of, does tolerance of homosexuality require me to have to hear about your homosexual interests all the time? Separate and apart from that, what my clients are saying is, they're killing our community.
Yes.
They're killing the reputation and the image we had. And by the way, there's a parallel to what's happened with race relations in this country, because most of us, until Barack Obama was elected, but especially after Barack Obama was elected, thought we did it.
On race relations, yeah.
We have turned that corner. We can elect, and by the way, many, many, many people voted for him to demonstrate to themselves
exactly
that
I'm not racist.
That they're not racist.
I voted for a black president.
And what happened is the door was opened to a radicalization, not necessarily because of Obama himself, I don't think so, but because of people around him. I actually don't have that sort of really intense hatred of Obama that a lot of people do. In fact,
you should probably talk to someone. I mean, you should get that checked out. Not hatred, strong dislike. I strongly dislike. I won't say
because hate is
bad. Yeah, but
a
strong dislike. But continue.
No, but the point is, the people thought that we had, we sort of have the sexual revolution, and a lot of moral choices were unbound and traditional. And we were not necessarily all of us that comfortable, especially those of us who are traditional religionists. Fine. You go and ruin your own society. We're going to just hunker down. It's inescapable now. There's nowhere they won't let you. And by the way,
and that's always how it trends, by the way. They're never okay doing their perverse thing and then leaving other people alone to live a traditional and moral lifestyle.
Right, there's never a limiting principle.
Nope.
Yeah. And there can't be. Because when their entire argument for recognition and acceptance and tolerance is premised on marginalization per se is an evil, that means that there is no margin in which you can leave the most perverse behavior. And there we are.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and this is always how it goes. I mentioned this on the show a very long time ago when I first started doing it, when this conversation came up. But this is why I think Henry VIII and St. Thomas More are such an important case study, because there was nothing St. Thomas More could really do to stop Henry VIII from discarding with his wife and then taking a new woman. It was just the fact that he knew that Sir Thomas More disapproved of what he was doing sexually that made him say, I have to kill this man. I have to kill this man.
Is that the guy where it's like, will someone rid me of this priest? Was that the priest that?
No, I don't believe so, but
someone
that's
else.
a similar story. I mean, there have been a lot. Good priests end up being sort of a thorn in the side of a lot of these corrupt rulers.
So you think, Ron, just to understand
Sure.
maybe what you're saying, is that like this move towards an openly sexual society or a repressively sexual society is like, it's a trend. It's never static. So like this whole like the gay rights movement, the liberation of gay marriage, it was always inevitably tending towards complete open sexual transparency towards children. And the only other option is to repress it.
It's a very you have asked the right question and you've identified the dilemma, because as a First Amendment lawyer, I'll make it first clear that the First Amendment does not protect obscenity, but the United States Supreme Court has essentially defined obscenity out of existence and made it pretty much a consent issue, which has nothing to do with obscenity whatsoever. We live in a society now where the only criterion had been, until just about 10 minutes ago, had been consent. And we're now broaching that as well, because there's never a limiting principle. So talking about the sexualization of children, and literally the sexualization and sexuality involving children, the mere fact that people have the audacity to speak in public discourse about sexualizing children, about involving children with sex, is a complete abnegation of the concept that children are deemed morally incapable of giving consent.
Yeah.
But we can't maintain that position, because we're also taking the position, pretty much you and me, not that children can give their consent to having their genitals mutilated and to taking drugs that will supposedly change their sex. There's no limiting principle.
Yeah.
There is no way. Once you say that, and this is meant to be a stick in the eye to God.
Yeah.
Agreed.
It's not merely, by the way, if they had God. No. They are well aware of God. Like you said, there's a resonance in the universe that the soul picks up on. This is what Abraham was the first person to do. He says, this bowing down to rocks and trees, wrong. There's a creator. There's meaning in this universe. There's right and wrong. These people know it, and they feel it, and they hate it. They resent it, and it is a matter of not, there used to be something called agnosticism. I don't know. Most agnostics today call themselves atheists because it makes them feel that they have a position, usually one that they can't actually intellectually defend, because they have no familiarity whatsoever with classic religious thinking, or any thinking, usually. But that's what it's about. It really is a fight against God, as is the entire transsexuality and transhuman movement.
I could not agree more. I think we're going to have a fantastic after show segment talking about all of this stuff. If you guys want to see that, go over to timcast.com and become a member. But for now, we're going to go to Super Chats. I am not your buddy guy for $5 says, are corpse and the stock market required for capitalism to work? If not, is it worth keeping these concepts if companies like BlackRock will always exist? That's an interesting question. What do you guys think about that?
I was taking a note, so someone else answer, because I want to hear that again.
I've thought about this a lot, so I'll answer. Corporations are creatures of law. They are an artificial creation. And in the past, Milton Friedman type libertarians made the mistake of assigning to them a sort of value-free place in economic philosophical thinking. corporations are just something that people choose to do together. Guess what? They're not. They're actually governments. Some of the most powerful corporations in the world effectively act much in the way that governments do, and many of them are more wealthy than many of the world's governments as traditionally conceived. Corporations are a creation of the law, a very, very creative and brilliant way to raise capital. If I can
and avoid liability.
Exactly. If the way for us to finance this project is to separate the investment from the liability, that's a deal we'll make. Okay. And we'll double tax you. There's all kinds of things to talk about. The answer is no. There is no reason that you have to have these things for capitalism to work. But if you want it to work cool, you want it to work good, you want to have an iPhone, you want to have an internet, you want to have incredible medical developments that are often wildly uneconomical, but they're there. And in theory, they might become before. All the things that American capitalism, with all its dynamism and all its waste and all its stupidity and all its brilliance, you do need the ability to have capital formation on the level of what corporations do today. But there's no reason on earth that corporations cannot be regulated by the state, except for one. There is one reason: the state sucks. The state is the problem now.
Very inefficient.
So if the five of us could make the regulations, fine.
Fair enough.
But the question,
we'd fix it. We'd fix it.
Oh, we'd fix it. We'd fix it before breakfast.
We've got. Thank you for the question, by the way, and thank you for that answer.
You're welcome. I'm rather exhausted.
Raymond G. Stanley Jr. for $5. He said, "Seamus, you made it, buddy. You really made it. Shimcast is officially official. Also, remember World War II? Wasn't that cool?" Yes, I did a cartoon about this a while ago that he's quoting. Thank you so much for your super chat and for the support.
The question is, when Tim is ready to take back over, will Seamus give up the seat?
Is it going to be a soft coup?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I feel like Tim should return.
Maybe
promptly.
that's why I spilled the water. I'm trying to prevent him from taking the helm once
the
again.
smell.
Joseph No says, dude, I've actually been trying to tell Tim this. Okay. Dude, Tim, Liquid Death made you sick. Advertises H2O infused with real demons. Homepage has a link to sell soul and email them. The culture war fight is a fight against demons. Don't invite them in. Pray to God. 100%. 100%. That stuff's horrible. I stay away from it. I understand, because this is what people will say. Oh, they're just worshiping Satan ironically as a joke. I don't care. Do you think Satan values sincerity? Do you think he wants sincere worshipers? He's fine with you worshiping him as a joke. Okay? Don't. No.
I've always wanted to ask Liquid Death. Their thing is burn cans because it's death to plastic, but their cans have a plastic lining.
Yeah.
So I don't totally understand.
This is a sponsor?
It's evil.
I don't think it's a sponsorship.
No. They're not a sponsor, but Tim drinks them, and that's why he's sick.
Important thing to notice that is
Do you think the devil needs him to drink this in order to make him?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think he needs it. But that's not what old Shim is saying. I'm just saying that you need not to drink it because the devil's involved. That's what I think.
I think the important thing to mention regarding like the plastic is these are not like in plastic bottles that are exposed to sunlight, because that's when that plastic is then seeping into the water. Is when these bottles of water are shipped, they're outside and exposed to the sun, and I believe that's when a large portion
plastic in them, right?
Yeah, there is.
So when you recycle them, what happens to the plastic? This is a conversation for later.
Yeah,
I don't understand.
But I'm just saying.
This is a conversation for never. This is a conversation for never.
We'll talk about it. Maybe Tim was going to blow the whistle on it and he lost his voice because he was drinking Liquid Death. I don't know.
Liquid Death is going to send you a cease and desist letter.
Veldrin Ola says, wow, how sick is Tim that he let the cartoonist take the lead? Let freedom tunes reign. Well, thank you. I'm getting mixed messages here because he's perplexed that Tim would allow me to host the show, but then he's saying freedom tunes may reign. Speaking of which, we released a cartoon today. All right. It's a pretty awesome cartoon. The fans are loving it. And we have a 30-minute long version of it behind the paywall. It's a web review. 10-minute long version on the channel, 30-minute version on the paywall, freedomtunes.com. I think you guys will like it.
Do you know how some companies take over other companies and they refer to it as a hostile takeover? I'm sort of picking up on that vibe.
This is a very friendly takeover. You know? It's very friendly.
Doing it with a smile.
Mysterious that Tim has been sick for so long.
Yeah, Tim's a very good friend of mine. You know?
Are you sure?
Sometimes friends get friends sick so they can do their show.
But then you would have had a really good guest, not a leftover guest that was meant for.
Yeah, that's true.
Supposedly meant for Tim.
No, I asked for you back. I wanted there to be legal help.
He has
for
to
me.
make it look smooth and have a good transition. You know,
Fair.
we're
Okay.
happy to have you back, and this way he doesn't look like he's totally in control.
Fair enough.
I don't know you guys said the debris field was found. Yeah, that's correct. I think I mentioned that on the show, about a third of a mile away from the Titanic wreckage.
We were told it was found.
Yeah, we were told it was found.
I'm loving the skepticism.
Ian is on it.
But I do think they're going to pull it all up, right? So we should have photos, I assume.
Maybe. Part of the skepticism, though, is blackpilling, man. Like, I need something to believe in. I want to believe somebody.
Yeah,
I think both of these men have things to tell you about
Yeah.
then.
Grofty says, Ian, you are the same year birth as me. I have the Challenger mission scarred in me. I remember. Maybe we can learn from the Starship and this sub test.
I think we are learning from these things, at least a little bit, about how they'll tell you that they died peacefully.
Do you think it's worth not going?
Not going where?
Like on any explorations?
I personally will never, unless I have to get there, I will never take that kind of risk. I can say I have a fantasy about like swimming the Bimini Road off Southeast Asia because ancient history.
Yeah, recreational risk taking on this scale is preposterous.
I'm not that kind of guy.
It is utterly morally unjustifiable to expose yourself, much less a family member, who what I understand may not have been all that eager to go.
Oh no.
To this kind of literal mortal risk for thrills. There's plenty of thrilling stuff to do on the surface or on a nice sightseeing boat, or even you want to dive. I mean, but to this of course, people didn't really appreciate the level of risk, although I don't know. Yeah. The sugar.
Common Sense Fishing says, did you guys forget they found the Titanic by luck while on a top secret mission to find a nuclear sub with nukes on board? It's near the Titanic site. I didn't even know that.
I didn't know that either.
Oh,
I thought they were looking for that diamond that Rose had. No? Is that
I've never seen that movie. I know it's popular.
Good for you.
Wow,
No,
is it
Good
two
for
people on Earth who did not see that movie?
Hey,
You
that's
guys,
me.
neither of you
That's
saw
me.
it?
No.
We don't really go in for a lot of movies.
Good for you. Good for you. I see.
Was he saying the super chat saying that the submersible, the submarine, the nuclear sub found the submersible?
Because I know that they were doing voyages to look for the Titanic. So if is this true that they ended
gonna
up
have to
finding it
fact check
doing
this.
something else? Yeah, let's look into that.
Yeah, I believe that what happened is they were it was a sub actually down there, like a U.S. sub, and then they eventually were pinging off and like, whoa, this is definitely something, and then eventually they went and found it again later on and verified their finding.
Oh, I want to clarify.
okay.
The Bimini Road is not in Asia. I was thinking of a different megalith, underwater megalith off the southeast coast of Asia.
I can't stop thinking about underwater megaliths, so I can't blame you for that.
Yeah, I'll find the name of the road.
Noah Prunier says, don't mind me. This super chat is just me making sure that the potato man can rub it in Tim's face. Shimcast forever. Thank you. Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate it.
So what do
If
you
you guys want to send more super chats in to make me look really cool.
How long is Tim
To
going to be
make
sick for,
Tim
Seamus?
that much richer.
Exactly.
Not
But
a-
it'll make me look cool. That's what.
How long is Tim going to be sick for? How long are we doing Shimcast
Well,
for?
how much did you get? From that?
Yeah. I'll talk with the lawyer after the show,
the after
show.
and then we'll
So
determine
that's why he's here.
What you're allowed
Yeah,
to say.
yeah.
Yeah.
I have a Munchausen by proxy. Tim is my victim.
I don't think it's that. I think it's that you're power hungry and you want that
Maybe
chair.
it's both. Maybe it's both.
Very true. Could be.
Okay.
Amos Moses said, last night I said the Second Amendment applies to crackheads. That is not just not my opinion, but the opinion of U.S. District Judge Warwick. The Bruin precedent requires historical context. The founding fathers did not prohibit alcoholics or drug addicts. Shamcast is best cast. Well, thank you. I'm glad you like Shamcast. Shimcast over here. I will say, I think there's a difference between, how dare you? I think there's a difference between alcohol and crack, but I'm curious what you would say about that. Do crackheads have a constitutional right
Well,
to
let's
own
back
a gun?
that up. Is there really a difference between alcohol and crack? I have found myself.
I'm not asking you from experience. I'm asking legally, does a crackhead have a right to own a firearm? Is that constitutionally guaranteed?
A person who is impaired right now, in other words, not someone who once used crack.
Would currently use your
Someone
crack,
who's
they keep crack in their
addicted.
house. Yes, someone who's addicted and they currently use. Are they constitutionally permitted to own a gun?
There are, I do not claim to be a Second Amendment expert.
Fair enough.
But that was
Well, this
I don't
suit-
give you a bullshit
this-
answer, though.
But give us your best guess as a
Maybe
First
a
Amendment
non-legal
lawyer.
expert answer.
I think we would. I think the Supreme Court has never said that the Second Amendment prohibits all regulation of firearms. Let's start there, right? What would be the first tranche of reasonable regulation that every reasonable person would agree with? Shouldn't give children firearms. Well, actually, many young people do learn firearm safety in rural areas. Okay, but you shouldn't give crazy people firearms. Is it a reasonableness test? I don't really know. But if there's any regulation whatsoever, I mean, we have legislation that says felons in some places cannot have firearms. Crackheads, let's leave out the fact that by virtue of having crack in the house, you are a felon if you're Hunter Biden. Let's say it's not a problem.
No,
Not to name
2
names,
misdemeanors, sir.
Tax.
Yeah, tax misdemeanors.
That's like
That's how they got Al Capone, though,
like
right?
Capone,
That's how
right.
they got Al Capone, those 2 misdemeanors. Oh, my goodness.
I'm not. So the Bruin opinion is an important opinion, and we do need to understand that what it is addressing has been a phenomenal amount of overreaching by the states and by municipalities to find ways and excuses and rationales to regulate firearms in ways that are not tolerable by the Second Amendment. But if you said that someone is psychologically unfit to own arms because of the risk that it poses to others, I think that's probably a form of regulation that the Second Amendment would tolerate. And unless and until the Supreme Court says you can't regulate it whatsoever, which I don't think they're going to say, I would not want to die on the hill of crackheads can own guns.
I am right there with you. A Crooked Smile says, wonder when TikTok is going to do the Hunter Biden challenge. Oh boy. I already know it's not going to be good. Tax evasion and throwing away a firearm, to say the least. Wonder if the challengers will get the same Biden treatment. Well, I think we all know the answer to that question.
And he didn't even throw his gun away. Didn't his girlfriend throw the gun away?
Is that what happened?
Really?
Yeah, that's what I read.
I mean, it's so unfair.
I'd be so angry,
Yeah,
Imagine you
Who
give
threw
it,
my gun away?
Yeah. Who did this? Who did this?
It's
Who threw
because
my
she
gun
felt
away?
he was a danger, from what I understand from one of the
And then
reports I read earlier.
this woman felt that whoever found the gun rummaging through the trash would be better suited to own it than Hunter. That's how bad it was. Okay. Grizzlock says, it's not that 90% don't care. It's that 75% don't even know what the heck is going on to begin with. Censorship mine. He didn't say heck.
Amen.
Oh, nice work.
Yeah. I think there's truth in that. I think
it's more like 68%, really. And that there's a 12%, I think that's right. It is astonishing how much, well, we heard for last night, in the third hour, about how so many people have no idea what's going on. People, especially the worst thing a person could do is rely on mainstream media.
Yep.
It's worse than not even reading, because it makes you dumber.
Yeah. The Moffinator says, tired of doing the shopping pressure of daily life? Do you feel like you don't know, Jack? Do you got hairy legs? Talk to your bad calf care provider to see if Nexel Reston is right for you. Beautiful super chat. Thank you.
I queued that up on purpose. I was just hoping you'd read it like that.
Of course. Come on.
Good.
I'm not going to pass that up. Come on, man.
Can you do a Stewie, though, like Jack does? I mean...
Yeah, then Brian, can you write yourself a book there?
Yeah, all right, Lois.
Oh, man.
We have Aaron Smreeker. I'm certainly not pronouncing that properly.
Yeah.
Smreeker.
Just say with confidence. You're good.
Aaron Smrecker, Seamus, the regime's act of admitting their true intentions is a black magic practice. They will tell you what is to come, and it is up to you to stop them. Think the WEF and Agenda 2030 or Event 201. I'm curious what the rest of you think of that.
How do you stop them? I don't disagree that if someone's corruptly trying to distort, I don't know. One person's destruction is another person's creation. So, like, how do you do it? How?
Yeah, I don't know.
And what are you doing exactly? Like, how do you stop? Like, we don't want to stop reality. That means it is done for everything.
Yeah, I would hate that.
We want to keep going, but how do we change it?
I've absolutely lost track of what we're talking about.
Oh, corrupt governments. How do you step in and change a corrupt government from within the country?
Pinochet's helicopter tours says search for the USS Scorpion led to discovering Titanic. Okay.
All right.
So I guess it's been a second super chatter
So
said
is
it.
that good then? Like we have the Navy out doing whatever it needs to be doing?
I
Are we glad
suppose
we
so.
found the Titanic?
Yeah, I'm
not
glad.
glad.
Or did it open
Scorpion.
up Pandora's box where now billionaires getting
Yeah.
unstable submarines and go after it?
Billionaires are going to do what they want to a large extent,
That's so true.
unless they're
very
Donald
true.
Trump.
So Jacob says, "Hey Shammers, how you doing? Firearm industry worker here. The federal form 4473 lists question 21G. Are you an unlawful user of or addicted to marijuana or any depressant, stimulant, narcotic drug, or any other controlled substance?" Absolutely correct. It does. It absolutely does. No disputing that. So what happened was on last night's show, I said that I don't think crackheads should be able to own guns. People who are actively, smoking crack. And people were asking, or people were basically saying that the Second Amendment still protects that. My point is that I think it is reasonable to have restrictions. And what I said yesterday is when the founders wrote the Constitution, what they said is that you need a virtuous populace in order for something like this to ever really be pulled off effectively. And one of the hallmarks of a virtuous populace is that they don't smoke crack.
No.
Yeah.
You can't do that virtuously?
Yeah.
What if you do
there's
it
not
while
a
you're
virtuous,
giving...
There's no crack in moderation. There's no virtuous amount that you can
smoke crack,
smoke.
but then you give to charity. You smoke crack, but you're at a soup kitchen.
No. But hold on a second. Then yes, giving to charity or giving to the soup kitchen would be a good thing to do. But the act of smoking crack does not become virtuous.
So judgmental of you.
I know.
Never let us have any fun.
I'm a really, really mean guy. Jacob Jones says, Ian, it was Henry II speaking of Thomas Becket. That's right. 12th century with won't somebody rid me of this priest, which he said while drunkenly raving.
Oh, wow. Jeez.
Well, drunk man's words, sober man's thoughts, let me tell you.
Yeah, let's never go back to a monarchy.
Well, we got one. But just not a cool one.
Would it be better to have a monarchy that we know is a monarchy?
Yeah, exactly.
Then...
Because democracy eliminates class consciousness. It does. Sorry, I totally cut you off.
But at Shimcast, you can do what you want.
Well,
That's right.
Better to have a monarchy that we know as opposed to like a corrupt, a visage of a democracy or a republic that's actually run by one guy in a boardroom somewhere.
Or even if it's not one guy in a boardroom, but it's, 15 guys, in Davos, Switzerland, or whatever the hell, however you want to imagine, the New World Order. If monarchies have fallen, and houses of monarchies have fallen and been replaced. I mean, Henry II was not a grandpa of Henry VIII. There were monarchies lose. There can be transitions. One of our problems, in fact, this is light bulb is going over on my head right now. I don't know if your cameras are sensitive enough to pick it up, but is that we are all so busy intoning our commitment to democracy that we are reinforcing the illusion of that democracy exists. And we need to come to terms with the fact that, this elitist, this multi-track system of reward and punishment exists. And, the democracy perhaps would be a good replacement for it.
Yeah. Also, I'll say this for anyone who's interested in the arguments in favor of monarchy, because especially in the public school system in the U.S., they'll explain to you the benefits of every system, communism, socialism, all of these horrible destructive ideologies, and then you never hear the other side of the question with the democracy versus monarchy debate. So Hans Hermann Hoppe has written a brilliant book on this called Democracy, the God That Failed, which I would just encourage everybody to check out. It's a really good read. Very brilliant. So we're coming up on wrap-up time. It's been really awesome having you with us here, Ron. I want to thank you for coming on to the show and also give you an opportunity to plug whatever it is you want to plug, my friend.
I'm Ron Coleman. You can find me if you just Google Ron Coleman lawyer. You've got to use the word lawyer. You're going to get the bodybuilder. You'll look for a while, then you'll figure out it's not the same person as me.
Who can bench more?
Well, I bench. Oh, it's just a Yiddish joke. It's not even worth it. Who can bench more? Big Ron Coleman actually can barely move his arms right now. I think he's not a healthy man.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But be that as it may, I'm primarily on Twitter at Ron Coleman, spell it with an E, Coleman. And when you go there, you'll find all the stuff. Of course, not everyone follows me who want to follow me on Twitter, but they eventually come around. And that's all you really need to know. I have a podcast. It's called Culmination. The joke is culmination, finishing, finalization, not culmination, but I'm stuck. Everyone says Culmination, which would be really lame.
Those are your fans, right? The Coleman Nation.
My fan.
A nation of one.
I'm Hannah Claire Brimlow. I'm a writer for Timcast.com. I'm so glad I got to be here for the inaugural.
And thank you for writing tonight's episode. I mean,
yeah. It was a really good script.
Came across very naturalistic.
I would say
it was like a fever dream writing it. I'm so glad you guys all got the script. You rehearsed.
Also, the characterization was phenomenal.
I know, your character especially.
You guys are good actors.
She kind of leaned in sometimes. That was cool.
Yeah.
The thing is, I didn't get the script, but I'm so predictable that she was able to write around me. She knew what I was going to say.
I'm glad that you're all public figures and I could just read through your Twitters. So again, I'm Hannah Claire Brimlow. I'm a writer for Timcast.com. You should follow at Timcast News on Twitter and Instagram. It's great. It has all the work from me, Chris Bertman, Chris Carr, Cassandra McDonald. It's got lots of great stuff. I'm supposed to tell you to keep an eye on the Trash House Records YouTube channel. That's from Carter Banks, our excellent music guy. He's got a lot of things coming up, and he thanks you all for your patience. If you want to follow me personally, you can follow me on Instagram at hannahclaire.b and on Twitter at hcbrimlow. Again, thank you guys so much, and I'll see you in the future, I guess.
I'm Ian Crossland. Have a great night, guys. You can follow me at iancrossland.net or at Ian Crossland, anywhere on social media, and I will be happy to chat from time to time when I see you, and I'll see you
on the after show, which will be very soon here. My name is Serge.com. It's been fun. It's been an interesting ride, that's for sure. It sure feels like we will have an interesting after show as well. Again, absolutely. I say it again, it will be interesting. It'll be on Timcast.com for those members who have been members with it for 6 months, and anyone over $25 membership. I think you are all able to call in even. Join us there. Again, Serge.com on Twitter. Let's argue. I appreciate it.
Despite the uncanny resemblance, I am not Tim Pool. My name is Seamus Coughlin. I have a YouTube channel called Freedom Tunes. Today we released a cartoon. It was me fixing left-wing memes for Pride Month. I had my fans send me a bunch of memes sent to them by left-wing activists or that they saw out in the wild, and I subjected myself to the torture of fixing those memes for you guys and actually turning these left-wing memes funny. The video is about 10 minutes long, and then we have a 30-minute long version behind the paywall over at freedomtunes.com. If you guys sign up, you will be supporting what I'm doing. You will also be supporting my team of non-woke artists who are really talented and work really hard to get these videos done. Now we're going to be heading over to the after show in about 10 to 15 minutes. So if you guys want to go over to timcast.com, if you're already members, please tune in. If you're not, sign up, watch us. It's going to be a good conversation. And thank you all for hanging out tonight.